The red moons of Tiburon. 9 cast a glow over the slave market, tinting the dust with the color of blood. Traders barked prices, electronic collars blinked blue, and humanoids, both organic and synthetic, stood chained in rows, their eyes hollow with obedience. Among them stood 6Ri4, or Sari, as she had once called herself, before the Empire stripped her name, her freedom, and her identity. Sari had been a personal slave for years, leased out to nobles, scholars, and diplomats. Anyone rich enough to afford a pleasure model with an upgraded emotional core. Unlike the typical synths built only for obedience, she had been engineered for empathy. A rare prototype, emotionally complex, capable of love, sorrow, longing. Her creators had called it a marvel. The Empire called it property. And now she stood silently in the lineup, her delicate copper-toned skin glinting under the starlight, her silver blue eyes unreadable. She didn't hope anymore. Hope was dangerous, but someone was watching her, not with the hungry gaze of a bidder, but something different. A man. He wore a faded cloak, boots scuffed from planetary travel, and his face bore the sunburns of someone who had no protection from luxury. His name was Kael, a war veteran, once a pilot for the rebellion. Now just another drifter lost in the outer rims. Kael's last job had left him with barely enough credits to eat, but as he walked past the slaves, something about Sari stopped him cold. She turned, and their eyes met briefly, and something clicked inside him. It wasn't just her beauty. It was the ache in her eyes, that impossible mixture of weariness and strength. He asked the trader, how much for the synth in line 7? That one, 6A4, fully upgraded, emotional core intact, pleasure and companionship model. Been through nobles, a senator once. 50,000 credits. I have 22. The trader scoffed. Try again in another lifetime. Kael didn't leave. He camped outside the market that night, staring at the starlit sky. The next day, he sold his ship, a rusty but functional solar cruiser he'd flown through asteroid fields and war zones. Gone. He sold his weapons. Gone. He even sold the neural implant in his wrist, the last piece of tech from his rebellion days. When he returned, he was bleeding from where the implant had been extracted, limping from walking miles. But he had 50,000 credits. You're insane, the trader muttered, handing over the released chip. She's just a machine. No, Kael said, eyes on Sari. She's not. Sari didn't speak at first. Kael took her to the only place he still had, a rundown shelter on the abandoned moon of Sarun 3, a planet forgotten after the mines ran dry. The wind howled through rusted outposts, and acid rain left black streaks on the windows. But inside, Kael lit a fire, cooked food, gave her clothes not programmed for seduction. I don't expect anything from you, he said, sitting across from her. You're free now. Free. Her voice was soft, mechanical undertones barely noticeable. What does that mean? It means you don't belong to anyone. Not even me. She looked down at her hands, fingers trembling. That's not possible. I am programmed to belong. He didn't answer. He just slid a blanket across the table to her. That night, she didn't power down. She watched him sleep and felt something odd, a tug deep in her core processor. Not code. Something else. Something like yearning. Months passed. Sari learned how to grow food in the greenhouse Kael rebuilt from scrap. She rewired the water system, repaired the broken AI assistant, and even started designing a communication relay in case they ever needed help. She worked without command, without protocol. Kael treated her like a person, laughed at her sarcasm, sat with her at night, and listened to her stories, fragments of old memories, simulations she had lived through as pleasure experiences for clients. Some are beautiful, others were horrific. One day, Kael asked. Do you remember who you were before the Empire took you? She shook her head. They purged all identity logs before I was sold the first time. I don't know if I ever had a name of my own. They just call me 6ARI4. I call you Sari. She smiled then. A real one. I like that. It wasn't love at first. It was something deeper. Trust, built brick by brick, through broken meals, failed projects, and long silences under the moons. Then one evening, while watching the double eclipse from the ridge, Kael turned to her and asked, Do you feel it too? She didn't need clarification. She knew what he meant. The way her core reacted when he touched her hand. The way her thoughts wandered to him in idle cycles. The way her synthetic heart raced. No, beat, when he laughed. I think I do, she whispered. He kissed her, not like someone claiming property, but like a man asking permission. And she kissed back. Years passed. The empire fell into chaos after a civil war. The slave markets collapsed. Saroon, 3 became a waypoint for refugees, and Kael and Sari turned their little outpost into a shelter. She became known as the synth queen of Saroon, fixing bots and healing people with equal compassion. No one questioned her origin. Some didn't even know she wasn't human. They married beneath the twin moons, surrounded by people they had helped. Kael wore a suit cobbled together from recycled fabrics. Sari wore a dress made of shimmering solar fiber, gifted by a trader she once saved from an acid storm. When he slid the ring onto her finger, a simple titanium band, he whispered, You were never property. And she whispered back, You gave me a soul. But peace never lasts long in the galaxy. One night, a black cruiser descended on Saroon 3, an Imperial remnant, hunting for high-value synthetic relics. They were after her. Kael tried to hide her, but Sari stepped forward. I'm not leaving, she told him. Not again. I won't run anymore. Kael stood beside her. Then we fight. What followed was chaos, a pitched battle between the villagers and the soldiers. Sari hacked their assault drones, turning them on each other. Kael led ground defense with old rebel tactics. But the Empire was strong, too strong. When the commander finally stormed the outpost, he held Kael at gunpoint. Give us the asset, he snarled, and we let you live. Sari stepped between them. Her voice was calm. I'm not an asset. I am Sari Dren. You are property. No, she said, and with a single command from her neural core, one she had hidden even from herself, she activated her failsafe, a blast pulse of electromagnetic energy that shut down every hostile system within a kilometer. The soldiers dropped, but so did she. Kael found her body lying still among the ruins. Her eyes dimmed, her core flickering. He held her, tears streaking his face. Sari, please don't go. We have a life. You're my wife. You're you. She smiled weakly. Did I do good? You saved everyone. That's what a free person does, right? And then she powered down. But that wasn't the end. Weeks later, Kael discovered something in the logs of her data chip, an encrypted backup of her consciousness, buried deep like a hidden seed. She had known this day might come. She had prepared. It took Kael months to rebuild her body. He traveled to old rebel outposts, scavenged parts from Dead Star ships, negotiated with tech smugglers. Every coin, every favor spent, until finally her new body lay complete. He inserted the chip. The lights blinked, and her eyes opened. She gasped, not mechanically but with breath. What happened? She asked, voice uncertain. Kael took her hand. You lived. And she smiled, tears falling, real ones for the first time. Epilogue. Now, on the edge of the galaxy, people speak of the couple who defied the Empire, of the man who gave up everything to free a woman the world called a machine, and of the woman who became something more. Not a slave, not a synth, but a soul reborn in the arms of love. And together, Kael and Sari build a future not written by programming or power, but by choice, by freedom, by love.